Hello, this is a video response to Venaloid's recent video on the topic of human moral intuitions and what they are and how we could describe them. He kind of asked the question, is there a way that we could readily define and describe human morality to some outsiders, say some aliens or what have you, besides simply these are the values that people tend to hold, or these are the things that people tend to do. And in kind of discussing this topic, he gives three different thought experiments. In the first one, there's a world where there are only plants. They're plants, they grow, they die, they leave seeds, the seeds grow, they die, they compete for sunlight, they compete for minerals in the ground, water, rain, etc. And that's the world. That's the whole world, and the question is anything that happens there moral, immoral? Do those words have any meaning in that world? And I'm sure most people would probably say, well, no, not really. Venaloid gives a second thought experiment in which there's a similar world, except instead of plants, this world has a very large number of robots, like the Mars rover, that kind of thing, or various rovers. You know, they've got their solar panels, they've got their wheels, they go around, they collect sunlight, and maybe they take pictures, maybe they transmit them, maybe they process ore, whatever. But point is, there's competition for the sunlight, and maybe some of the robots might destroy other robots or flip them over, you know, as just part of what they do. And the question then is, are any of these moral or immoral? Like when you have the plants that are growing so that they cover up the sun from the other plants, are these robots immoral because they raise their solar collectors above the other robots? You know, that kind of thing. Is this moral or immoral? A lot of folks would probably say, well, yeah, I guess you could say that, but that's not really what morality is all about. You know, the social moral intuitions of what moral values are all about don't really seem to apply to machines. They were just machines. And then Venaloid gives this third thought experiment in which there's presumably a man named Joe, and Joe doesn't care about anything. He doesn't have a value system. He doesn't have emotions. He doesn't have sensations or feelings, or if he does, they're meaningless to him. They, even at the deepest down, most deep level, it doesn't matter. Whatever. He does not care. He's like the honey badger. So Joe goes and somebody cuts his arm off for whatever reason. We don't know the reason. And the question that Alex or Venaloid asks is that moral to cut off this person's arm? And I guess the answer to is it moral, or does the question of morality make sense or not, the answer to that is it depends on who you ask, because it's like asking what color an object is. That can depend on who you ask. What flavor is this? That depends on who you ask. Morality it's a value system. It's an intuitive response to a situation. It's a way of assessing something and having an opinion about it. And so it depends on who you ask. If you ask Joe, is it immoral for this other person to slice off your bicep, your arm, not your bicep? I guess it doesn't really matter. He would say, what do you mean? I don't even know what you mean. What is that? I don't know what you're talking about. To him, morality makes about as much sense as color would make sense to a blind person. You could describe the wavelengths of light, but they'd be like, I don't even, what do you can say this to me, but I don't know what you mean. But that's just one actor in the equation. There's the another actor, which is the person who cuts off his arm. And when you ask that person, was this a moral action or not, they may have a very different answer than Joe. They might say, well, I think I can assess it as moral or immoral, and here's why I think it was moral. Or here's why I think it was immoral. You know, they will, assuming that they are not also some wacky sociopath who has no values, they'll probably have some kind of moral assessment. And there's a third actor in the equation, and that actor would be someone in the audience or somebody that is observing this who is not the object or the subject, but they're just watching. Are they going to say that action is moral or immoral? Because if they don't have those value judgments, then morality it'll be like describing wavelengths of light to describe what color something is. It won't really have much impact on people that don't have those intuitions. They might be able to understand it from a clinical, technical, scientific, describing the facts of the situation. This person's psychology means that they believe this about this, but they're not going to get the qualia of the situation. So the question of, is this moral or immoral, or does morality even make sense? It depends on who you ask. So Joe, that's irrelevant. The person that does it to Joe, it's relevant. Assuming they're not, just like Joe. If the world was populated with people like Joe who have no moral sense, they have none of those social intuitions, they don't have that value, any of those values, they just act like the robots or like the plants. Could you say, does morality exist in that world? Is that a term that makes sense? Like tonality, would that make sense to people that are deaf? I don't think it would. I don't think that would apply there. So when Venaloid says, what does he say? Venaloid suggests that morality is contingent upon the emotions of sentient beings or social beings. And I think that makes sense, because if you had a universe where there are no sentient social beings with social emotions and those sort of intuitions, like if it's a universe of rocks, I don't see where there's morality. If it's a universe of robots that are machines that do not have social emotions or social intuitions, then I don't see how morality is a term that is useful to describe anything. If it's a world full of robots and complex machines that do have social intuitions and social emotions and value judgments, then I think morality does make sense, and that term is a term that is useful, and there are things that go on that can be called morality. So can you spell out human morality? I guess getting back to the initial question, could you spell out human morality in a book? Could you codify it? Or is it synonymous with human value judgments that are good according to other humans' value judgments? I kind of feel like it's the latter. I mean, you could probably write a book describing every single person's values, moral value judgments from the dawn of time until the end of time, and then you'd have a book of human morality. But unless you do that, you're going to have to generalize and say, well, many humans have this moral judgment. But that's all you'd be able to do. And of course, that's what we do in general. When we look at something, we say, well, that's immoral. The only reason that we can say that's immoral without having to specify that's immoral to me, it's because most of the time people agree about morality, more so than with flavor of food or that sort of thing. It's kind of like most people agree that something is red. I mean, if you're going to get into details of, well, it's more of a maroon, fine. But red versus green, almost everyone will agree if something is red versus green. You'll always have a few outliers, but that's a very small minority. So it's the same way with morality. 9 times out of 10, no, more than that. Billions of times out of billions and a few, people will agree on what's moral and what's not. In extreme cases, when it's a could go either way thing, like teal, is teal blue or is it green? You know, is this good or is it evil? I might say, well, it's clearly good. Teal is green. Somebody else might say, well, this is immoral. This so-called teal. This is blue. And another person would say, well, you know, it's kind of in between. I guess I could call it blue-green. I guess I could call it, it's not great, it's not horrible, it's kind of a mediumly amount of moral. I feel like I've gotten off topic. Anyway, could we say that morality is simply something that is purely contingent upon the emotions of social sentient beings? I think so. That's the best way to describe it as far as I can tell. So there you go. A little long-winded. Don't know if that's useful to your ponderings, but hopefully it is. Thank you for your time.